So we know intuitively, and we know because of what happened on January 6th, that there are some Republicans, some portion of the Republican electorate that is willing to turn to violence, that sees violence as legitimate or at least justified in order to achieve their political goals. There's a new study from the Public Religion Research Institute that looks very specifically at who are the Americans that are willing to turn to violence to achieve their political objectives. And we're going to look at that right now. Salon summarizes this as an alarming finding, but no surprise. Many Republicans now ready to support violence. New PRRI poll finds direct links between Trump's big lie, far-right media, and support for potential violence. New public opinion research. The 12th Annual American Values Survey from the Public Religion Research Institute has alarming findings. Close to a third of Republicans in the survey, 30%, agree with the statement, true American patriots may have to resort to violence in order to save our country. That's more than the combined total of Democrats and independents who say the same thing at 11 and 17% respectively. Let's look at the numbers. We're going to look at some other elements of this study because it's really well done, really interesting. The question was, how do you agree with the statement? True American patriots might have to resort to violence in order to save our country per party affiliation and selected attitudes. So, first of all, almost 1/5 of Americans do believe that true American patriots might have to resort to violence to save their country. All right. 18% of Americans say yes. The largest group by party identification is Republicans. 30% of Republicans believe violence may be justified to save the country. What's very interesting is that if you look at their media consumption, the Republicans who trust mainstream news, only 22% believe they may need to turn to violence. Of the Republicans who most trust Fox News, the number goes up to 32% believe they may need to turn to violence. And if Fox News is too liberal for Republicans and they only trust far-right news, presumably stuff like Newsmax, OAN, and conspiracy stuff, then a full 40% of them, 40% believe that violence may be justified, which is stunning. Now, 17% of independents and about 1 out of 10 Democrats also believe the same. And in terms of specific beliefs, if you believe that the 2020 election was stolen from Donald Trump, there's a 4 out of 10 chance that you also believe violence may be necessary or appropriate. If you believe God has granted America a special role in human history, 27% chance. Okay, so those are very, very disturbing numbers for one very specific reason. There are 30% of Republicans willing to admit in a poll that they would be supportive of violence. How many Republicans would be supportive of violence but aren't willing to admit it in a poll? It's some number for sure, and I don't know exactly what that number would be, but that's also a significant concern. Now, there's lots of things to look at in this study. Just a couple of others in terms of attitudes. And I encourage you to check, we're linking to this, check out the entire study. One interesting question that was studied is, has the U.S. always been a force for good in the world? And has there never been a time you were not proud to be an American? So overall, 74% of Americans believe America has always been a force for good in the world. And 58% of Americans say there was never a time I was not proud to be an American. Not surprisingly, Republicans are far more likely to believe that than Democrats, but it's not like Democrats are slouches. The portrayal, the stereotype, so to speak, is Democrats don't really like the U.S. Democrats have a very anti-American attitude. If you look at these questions, it's not that low. I mean, 2/3 of Democrats still believe America has always been a force for good in the world. By the stereotypes of patriotism, it's not very unpatriotic. Okay, among other groups, white evangelicals and white non-evangelical Protestants seem to be the most stereotypically pro-American. Now, I say stereotypically because for me, being pro-American means very different things than it means to these groups, but by these definitions, followed by white Catholics and then Hispanic Catholics. Maybe not surprisingly, the religiously unaffiliated are those least likely to hold these stereotypically patriotic views about the United States of America. One other thing, we kind of talk about this idea of idealizing the 1950s that is prevalent among the American right. And when they talk about conserving and getting back to when America was great, it's often the 1950s that they have in mind. One of the questions, this really is a great study. You should really page through it. People were asked, do you think life has mostly changed for the better since the 1950s? Among Democrats, close to 2/3 believe life is better now than it was in the 1950s. Among independents, about half believe life is better now than it was in the 1950s. Only 29% of Republicans believe that life is now better than it was in the 1950s. And that's very telling when we think about conservatism. What do they want to conserve? What do they want to go back to? And it seems as though it's often this kind of 1950s idea. It's not wrong. It's not wrong. Not wrong to believe that. Last thing I want to look at: what traits do you associate with being truly American? And a really excellent question. Where you see agreement, where between all Americans, Republicans, and Democrats, there's not much of a difference, are believing in individual freedoms like freedom of speech. Republicans and Democrats basically united. That is something that is truly American. Believing every citizen should be able to vote in elections. Almost exact numbers between Democrats and Republicans. Accepting people of diverse racial and religious backgrounds. You start to see a little bit of a split. Republicans, slightly less than Democrats, believe that. But where you really start to see differences is on questions like being able to speak English. Is being able to speak English a sign of being truly American? 93% of Republicans say yes, whereas only 68% of Democrats say yes. Believing that capitalism is the best economic system. You see a 27-point gap between Republicans and Democrats on whether that is a sign of being really American. Believing in God. There is a 33-point gap. Almost 80% of Republicans believe that to be truly American, you must believe in God. Less than half of Democrats believe that. And then an interesting one, being of Western European heritage, a sort of white supremacist belief as being truly American. 1/5 of Republicans believe that, but almost 1/5 of Democrats believe that as well. Okay? Check out the study. We're linking to it. And recall, of course, that when it comes to this openness to violence to solve political problems, recall that Republicans claim to be about law and order until they are not. They claim to be about supporting the police until January 6th, when suddenly they didn't support the police. They claim to be about business freedom until some businesses started saying, hey, we want our employees to be vaccinated against COVID. Then they weren't about business freedom anymore. I could spend the whole show giving you examples. But the point here is they regularly fantasize about things that they claim they don't want to see. They claim they want to prevent the collapse of society, and yet increasingly they're willing to cause it in order to achieve what they believe will be successful political outcomes. I continue to see January 6th as a sort of trial for more violence in the future. There have barely been consequences for the rioters so far, starting to see some. No consequences for the inciters, including members of Congress, Trump staffers, Trump himself. And so it shouldn't come as a shock to us that the number of Republicans willing or who believe violence may be appropriate to achieve political gain is as high as it actually is. So send me your thoughts on that. If you follow me on social media, you know I love growing my own food in my backyard garden, and our sponsor, Lettuce Grow, has made growing food at home simpler than ever. The Lettuce Grow Farm Stand is a vertical stand that can be inside or outside, where you can grow over 200 varieties of fruits and vegetables. The farm stand waters and fertilizes itself. It does all the work for you. You can grow up to 36 plants at a time. Lettuce Grow sends you the seedlings, and then your food is ready to eat in 4 to 6 weeks. I've had a great experience with the Lettuce Grow Farm Stand. I've been growing delicious tomatoes, strawberries, eggplant, It only takes up 4 square feet, fits anywhere. I can move it around, very, very easy. Growing your own food is so rewarding. Lettuce Grow makes it easy for anyone, and Lettuce Grow is giving my audience $50 off the farm stand. Just go to lettucegrow.com/Pacman and use the code Pacman. The link is down below.